Adeline. Written by Jared Neely. Dick Feller was born a natural birth, born April 1 of 1941 as Richard Antonio Feller. His mother had named him after his great-grandfather's father who served in the Civil War as a medic. His full name was Richard Donald Shumaw. Dick had been named after him and his bloodline was a mix between Irish and Italian descent. As he grew older he insisted on others to call him Dick instead of his biological birth name. He didn't care what the birth certificate read or how hurt his mother might feel at the time, he would be himself. The name Richard seemed oddly proper to him, and who he felt his identity was not a Richard, he was a Dick Feller. A hard-nosed father and a devoted husband with a hazardous drinking habit lingering over him. No matter how far he shoved the temptations of it, it always came back. He was a plant worker and a coffee drinker and a tradesman, not to leave anything else out. He was also a stand-up guy when all seemed to fail. Although, whatever evil had honed in on him and had stolen his family out from underneath him, he was still the Richard Dick his mother had raised him as. It was much deeper now, but it was still inside him somewhere far out of his reach. He picked his face up, leaning outwards, gripping his spotty work boots from the floor. With his filthy hands against his face he pushed one on and then the other, tying them tight. He gazed through the doorway leading into the kitchen. The phone was hung and hadn't gone off since. He shook his head in disgust, briskly picturing Adeline running in from outside and plopping down onto his lap. But it was just a wild thought that would become short-lived. A second later he was sitting again on the same love seat with his feet stretched out along the floor. A moment passed as he listened to a once silent wind blowing from outside. It began to pick up suddenly as it squealed against the far right window. His mind was just beginning to calm, the memories he relived were now further and distant from him. Clink. 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 There was a sudden banging noise coming from outside. His eyes stared towards the front door as the noise abruptly came to a stop. He waited for it again, sitting on the cushioned back of the love seat. Sitting along waiting, his frame was dwindling even further into a pile of fragmented bones. The sharpness in his eyes had become a dull gray, casting over in doubt. Unsuspectingly, it happened again, but even louder and much angrier. But he did not realize it wasn't outside, nor was it at the door. It was above him on the second floor, either coming from Ade's room or the room his wife and him shared. The commotion grew as he lifted his arms in a hasty attempt at catching the tricky noise. His socks were soiled in sweat and torn at the heels as he scampered back to the curvy stairs leading to the second floor. A second later he reached the crown of the stairs, peering into Adeline's bedroom. He gawked ahead before his eyes caught the closet door to his left side. Something appeared off as it hung open a foot from him. Remembering vividly a moment earlier it being fastened shut, he stepped towards it. Brushing his fingers across the light switch on the nearest wall of the entranceway, he peered in through the darkness. As he entered into her room, the light flickered brightly and then dimmed. A short distance from him was the old hand-painted chest lying forgotten inside the closet. Adeline's shoe collection was scattered inside, barricading both sides of it. The closet appeared deliberately wrecked as he scooped his arm in to retrieve each one. Crouching there he hurried, placing each of them just outside from the chest along the floor. Dick paused a moment, noticing a light shining in from outside. As quickly as it hit the wall behind him it was gone. The highway was to the right of Adeline's room and he hadn't heard or seen a motorist pass since the stranger. Turning back towards the cedar chest he examined its beauty. "Where in the world did you come from?" he questioned the box, thinking of Adeline. The rumbling sound of thunder suddenly shook from outside, but there wasn't any rain. He counted until it happened again, with his fingers clutching the lid of the cedar chest. "Damn it, Ade," he thought, worrying about her, lost in the downpour. The sound of deafening thunder hit the side of the Colonial as he stared at the box. A terrible summer storm had immediately arrived. He thought about Faith again that very moment, growing angrier as the storm briskly began to surge just outside along the open fields. He could hear the wind picking up as it screamed through the window sills. The sound reminded him of a steaming hot kettle over a burner. The same kind his great-grandmother Edna Browning would brew her famous homemade recipe in. She would come to call her tea the Midnight Horseman. It was made of dried tea leaves and had a twisted smell to it. It was either the strange mint she added or the unripe lime juice she'd mix in. It was that along with all the secret stuff no one else really knew anything about. He shook his head from the thought, hoping to forget the common memories filling him since arriving at the Colonial. It seemed to become a habit of late for him. Again he poked his attention back onto the middle-sized box. Suddenly, he lifted the lid as it sprung open in front of him. Peering down at it, his eyes traced its contents, dipping his hands in to get a closer view of what it was. "Adeline!" he suddenly cried, sobbing, gripping the dark strands of hair covering her face. "Baby, can you hear me? Adeline, it's your daddy!" he shouted in desperation. Sweat and tears streamed down his cheeks as he raised her from the cedar box. Her body was folded and rigor mortis had started in as he lifted her onto the floor below. She was almost weightless now and had been in the cedar box for nearly an entire day. Her face was hardened and cold. Her mouth hung down, showing her teeth as if she was trying to speak her final words just before her eyes shut. Dick's eyes were now two black circles saturated in his grief. He plucked the hair covering her face. It was now a knotted mess of insects. Dead moths and wild timber seed had pasted it across her once lively complexion. Adeline's hands lay there at her side with broken fingernails. As if she struggled mightily to escape the box before giving in. Her father knelt onto one knee as he held her in his arms. Her decaying corpse lay silently against his nervous hands as he kissed her before putting her against the wooden floor underneath. "Baby, why? How did this happen? Lord, you take my unborn, you take my only child, for what masterful plan of yours gives you this right?" he screamed angrily, facing the dark windows ahead of him. Awaiting a sign back, but nothing came to him but the sound of crickets outside hobbling in the field. "I won't forgive this, damn it, do you hear me?" he continued, shouting towards the clouds of pitch-black darkness. "You need to give her back now. Or so God'll defile this world until you do." He spat threats into the night until he crumbled over and lay beside her along the floor. Just as his eyes softly shut into a rest, the rain pummeled down all at once. It hit the window as the wind blew harder, but he remained asleep beside her lifeless body. The sound of water hitting tin echoed over top of them as the storm surged and died off within a short while. Midway through the early morning he awoke on the floor, lying on his back. The August sun streamed across his face as his eyes poked open finally. Rolling towards Adeline, he suddenly melted in her absence. She was gone? The cedar chest sat beside where he had laid her, but it was now empty and left as it were from that night. "I'm going insane, Lord? Am I? Am I losing my ability to rationalize?" he quietly questioned whoever was there listening, almost smiling at the chest. Relief of some kind had come to him of her not being there. It was the powerful force working around him, either of good or bad, light or darkness. It was making itself known. Dick stumbled down the stairs, reaching the kitchen as he sat down. The room was extraordinarily bright as it shined in from two windows on the far side. A huge tree leaned over outside, shedding its leaves and branches across the glass left over from the storm. It hadn't shattered, good thing, he thought silently. But what does it matter? He quickly wondered, sitting there with his hands holding his face. A moment passed. Lifting his hands off from his bone-tired face, he hurried to the doorway leading outside. On the porch he peered out into the sun-filled landscape. It stretched out into the far woodlands about a mile from the Colonial. The woodland was about 200 yards from the old horse stable. The trees were tall, and on bright days they would spread shadows out into the field. Dick glared out at them as he stumbled his way into the grass, walking over the wild poppies and yellow daisies sprouting wildly underneath him. Midway into the field he examined the worn-down chicken coop that once held horses and hay bales and miscellaneous farming equipment. But that was many summers ago, decades maybe. The previous owners hadn't been seen or heard since the Fellers purchased the great mischievous Colonial. They were forgotten now and somehow they had been spared. Spared? Dick thought about them, thinking of his own family. He wondered why an elderly couple had been that fortunate, but not his own family. No, they had already been divided, and for what? The thought of the Colonial began to fill him with resentment. Angrily plodding towards the horse stable, he passed by it, barely noticing how far he had come. His hands were clenched tightly as he continued towards the towering oak trees standing side by side, which formed almost a wall. He stared at them as he neared them. It wouldn't take long until he reached them, putting his hand against the roughness of its trunk. The rotten wood began to crumble from it, falling onto the grass below. The bark was dry and appeared to have been used as a scratching post. Dick Feller examined the marks along the trunk. A deer or a buck had possibly used it? He thought to himself as his eyes met the ground below. There were animal tracks leading out from the woodland back towards the field. Not sure of what made them, he turned back into the deepness of the woods. His boots dug into the wet soil left over from the storm. He began to hike deeper into the darkened woods covered in wild roots hanging down from the trees surrounding him. Water vines and thorn bushes surrounding him in almost every direction as he reached the end of what appeared to be a man-made trail. Strangely, his eyes grew wide as he stopped in place, almost tripping over a small crevice in the dirt. "My God!" he murmured aloud, standing alone just watching. A foot from him laid 3 badly placed crosses somebody had built of barn wood. The red paint was fading and peeling underneath the chalk somebody had used to mark them. The names written on them were long forgotten as he closed in on them. Both crosses were leaning over and had split at the base but remained intact. Dick rubbed his boot against the ground, wondering inside if he was standing on somebody's grave. Leaves and broken roots lay underneath as he kicked it away, clearing the ground before the 2 crosses. He suddenly noticed the sky above as he peered through the trees hanging over him. The color of the clouds had turned from a dark purple to a soft white in a matter of his walk there. The sun was still fighting through the storm that had just left a few hours earlier as he peered back down at the strange sight. Thoughts swept him away as he wondered whose burial it was. He wondered how he came to find it all the way out there. Something had forced him there. What it was not of his own will. Through the heaviness of the brushy area his eyes glanced upwards unsuspectingly as they caught something hidden deep in the impenetrable forest. Peering into the stubborn wildlife, he was able to see the pointed arch of a structure sticking out from the trees. He had never seen the far side of the woods until now. From behind him the Colonial was just a light fuzzy shadow basking in the summer shine. He stood along the rickety grave staring past the crosses and into the trees out in the distance. The structure was unlike anything he had seen. The harder he fought through the heavy spruces and the jagged branches blocking his view, he could finally see it was a steeple, a long-regarded chapel of some kind. He left the burial, stepping over them where it appeared there was a small clearing that had once been a foot trail. At first he hadn't noticed it. Wild shrubs and high grass grew out from it on every corner as he entered inwards, facing the chapel in the near distance. His boots were now beginning to cake with wet mud and topsoil as he plodded in the direction of the ancient building. He suddenly swiped away a twisted vine hanging in his face as he came closer, realizing how magnificent the aged building was during the time of its build. A gigantic iron cross rose from the tip of its roof. Its sleek design sparkled above him as he stepped underneath and under its shadow. As he stood appreciating it, the shadow of the cross covered the whole left side of his gritty face. Dick Feller's mouth was agape as he admired the structure standing a yard from him. The building was overgrown in wild weeds of every sort. Patches of wild moss had grown along the outer walls and had begun to spread partway up the old faded white siding. The windows were shattered over time but still held the beauty once painted on by its most devoted followers. A portrait of baby Jesus covered both, sitting side by side. He was lying in a manger and surrounded by familiar faces. Biblical figures, ones Dick Feller couldn't quit name even if he dared to remember. It had been many long years since his last confession or even just sitting through a gospel in his hometown church. A Lutheran church, one his grandmother had snagged him up in every Sunday for a mere 30 years until he had enough. He hadn't been back since her death. Maybe, just maybe this was her doing? He wondered a moment, staring at it as if it knew everything about him already. Why the thought had crossed his mind he didn't have the slightest idea. But, something felt different there as he approached the entranceway. The doors were ajar and hung wide open along both sides. It felt as if the chapel was awaiting him to come inside. "Come inside, mister, I've been waiting for you." He could hear the voices in his head as if it were talking to him secretly. As he neared the dark entranceway into the long-forgotten chapel, swiftly peering in to observe the strange room that had been once a place for worshipping. Lifting his sopping boots, he stepped onto a platform leading to the doors. Suddenly, he lowered his head, realizing the mess his boots had tracked along. Rainwater poured from the roof's ancient gutter onto the ground not far from him. The leftover rain had made its way in the doorway as well. He examined the puddle as it slowly streamed in from outside. The chapel had dated back many, many years and had been built of miscellaneous scraps. From the doorway he could see where the light had come in from outside. The walls inside appeared to have been built of barn planks. His eyes stared in as he gawked heartily, noticing the rustic feel of the extraordinary chapel. Creeping further, an awkward smell seemed to stem its way in also. Dick took a deep breath, almost sniffing it in purposely. It was a familiar smell, not the same as the one the colonial held. This smell was much more masculine and somewhat had a taste as it caught his mouth. Inside, he studied the first room only a short distance from the outside. Behind him he could hear the sound of the water still dripping into the oasis beside the doors. The sound of a wild loon echoed also from outside. He turned but was unable to see it. It was high in the trees and perched there calling out into the forest. To him, the noise carried a chilling darkness within it. He continued to observe the chapel, stroking his fingers along a dusty mantle along the back of the room. A spot along the dust revealed a large book had once braced the wood where he stood in silence. The floor was roached out underneath his boots and covered in religious scripture. Somebody at some point in time had hand-torn thousands upon thousands of literature pages out from the book's binding. They had abandoned the messy room in what appeared to be in a hurry. Across from him standing was a litter of empty cans. They were broken into and piled in the corner. A rusty ladle sat upright inside one of them. They were rusted and smelled of decaying lima beans. He stared upwards at the ceiling, noticing many areas where the boards had warped and left everything from outside a way in. The chapel was near falling over as he stood inside. The thought of it didn't cause him any panic, but he could feel the exposure of being there. He took another step towards the back wall, which led to a narrow hallway and more rooms. Suddenly, the floor planks underneath him snapped and shot up on both sides. His leg fell deep into the rotten wood, causing him to shriek in pain. Fuck. Holding his knee, he reached around it, attempting to pull it back out. A deep gash in his leg where the wooden boards had jabbed him suddenly sprung blood. It was about a 3-inch wound and had begun to pour down his leg and onto his leather work boot. He gripped his leg again as blood covered his fingers. "Come on, damn it!" he screamed as he yanked it from the shattered floor. He was out now, but his leg was badly peeled back where it had made contact with the fall. "Son of a bitch, cocksucking motherfucker, look at what you did!" he shouted as sweat began to run down into his eyes. His hands were shaking and his leg was just now turning numb where the wood had got him. "There is nothing here to cover my fucking leg," he shouted again. He began to pull on his jeans, getting fresh blood down them. His mind was racing now, and he understood that if he was unable to wrap it, infection would be a surefire thing. With his leg tingling, he used his left arm and pulled his work shirt off. Underneath he wore a white undershirt. Taking the stained work shirt with the company's name embroidered along its pocket, he stuffed it against his bleeding thigh. "Got to slow it down," he quietly thought as he pressed against the wound. A moment later he placed the shirt's collar into his teeth, biting down as hard as he could. Suddenly, he pulled it forcefully, but it wouldn't trip. The polyester was too thick and stubborn to tear it into a rag. Time was pacing as always as he gawked about the dark space, searching for anything that would give him justice. Quickly peering around, he spotted the sharp edge along the wood where he had gotten injured. Wrapping the shirt around it, he snagged the bladed end and fought with all his strength to tear a piece to wrap his leg. Suddenly, it worked as he stumbled backwards, almost landing onto his back, but caught his balance. A shred of the shirt was clenched in his fist as he hurriedly spun it around, forming a tourniquet. A moment later the wound appeared to subside as he pulled himself back towards the double doors. Resting a while, he lay along the scraps covering the chapel's floorway. He turned to his side, using his elbow as a crutch, suddenly reaching for one of the torn pages lying by him. The daylight outside had quickly went dim since arriving there as he attempted to read it. The headline along the top of the page read Enoch. Dick had heard the name but was unsure of why he remembered it. He had watched a program on television about 4 months prior when he first learned of the name. Enoch. He thought, quickly plucking the paper back onto the dirty ground surrounding him. Not far from him the distinct sound of small predators scurried outside behind the door. Maybe they had somehow smelled the blood? He quickly wondered, laying there. His leg was numb and tingling, much worse than earlier. He had propped it up over top of a small pile of torn papers he had gathered along the filthy surface. It was becoming dusk and the night air had come in full force. He could feel the breeze from outside as it seeped in from the blackening forest. The moon had risen above the chapel and the trees within it had begun to rustle and sway in the night air. Dick Feller remained stationary along the floor, resting until the next morning. Somehow the thought of Julia or Adeline hadn't stopped emerging in his thoughts until his eyes became heavy and finally shut together. Awakening, his eyes shot open, realizing it was still early and even the morning sun hadn't peeked over top the mountains yet. Sitting now against the far wall, his leg appeared to heal some since the fall. Even the bleeding coincided, which was probably due to his staying still all night. Suddenly, a loud shouting match instantaneously occurred nearby. Dick paused a moment, wondering if they had spotted him inside the forgotten chapel. Adeline came to his thoughts as he leaped onto both feet. Slightly limping towards the badly fractured window, he could see what appeared as 2 individuals behind the thick weeds and trees blocking him. "Punishment for treachery is death, dear," shouted the unknown voice of an angry male. He sounded older and mature and spoke almost in a southern tone. "Death?" cried another voice in the distance, this time a younger female's voice. "My daughter shall repent in blood and suffer the sin she undoubtedly carried before God's will," the man shouted aloud. Unsuspected, the woman began running towards Dick, standing on the other side of the cracked glass. "Stop! Calm, a demon, I command you," the older man cried from behind her, giving chance. She hadn't seen Dick in the distance, but he could see her frail body weaving towards him through the wild brush. She wore a white dress and had flowing hair as she fought her way towards the chapel. Suddenly, the frustrations of the man bore down on her as he came flying at her. Landing on her back, he began to pummel her face into the sopping wet weeds underneath her. "Get off her, you fucking coward!" cried Dick from inside, but nobody appeared interested enough to acknowledge him. The man slammed his vein-filled fists into her head forcefully as she stopped squirming. Dick suddenly fired towards the double doors, almost forgetting his wounded leg. As he broke through the doorway, he peered out into the heavy weeded area where the 2 had dropped. But they were nowhere in sight as he approached the grass where the ground showed a terrible scuffling. He stood over it, confused and still shaken over the violent man's burning rage, but they had mysteriously vanished. He envisioned the enraged religious man, whose beliefs contradicted the precious words in which he believed he lived. The man in black, fashionably for his time, and slicked hair that shined oiled over on one side. The idea of him remained in his mind as he slowly plodded back into the forest towards the Colonial. He soon passed over through the graves where the old rambled crosses stuck crookedly in the mossy soil. The thought of Adeline someday finding them crossed over him as he faced the outer trees leading out. She'd find them eventually, and he knew it. She was adventurous and independent, the same as her mother. Adeline was a pure exhibitionist at her salivating age. Treading his back towards the Colonial, he stared ahead. The old chicken coop once incorporated into a horse stable. His wound was beginning to ache and slowed him as he hobbled on the same pathway leading him in. The wildflowers along the ground were standing still under the increasing heat. Dick Feller dragged his leg along until he reached a clearing in a field not far from the stable. He hadn't noticed it a dare. Approaching it, the grass appeared to be freshly moved, almost pushed away deliberately. He stopped walking as he reached a tiny mound of wet dirt in front of him. It was at his waist. Reaching towards it, he put his hands in the soil, rubbing them until the dirt crumbled off onto the pile below. His hands were dried and had begun cracking since leaving the chapel in the backwoods. He stood wondering if something back there had somehow caused an allergic irritation on his skin. His leg was saturated in sweat, and dry blood stains now covered his bandaged leg under the immense sunlight. His face was sore and almost as rough as dried leather, the same kind of leather slaughtered animals quickly become after being hunted. The stubbly skin along both of his cheeks was now badly blushed and bright red. He had taken a beating under the direct sun. He reached for his mouth but couldn't feel anything but the skin peeling from his lips. He spat onto towards the ground, but nothing came about. Not even the slightest bit of water. His mouth was waterless and had begun growing sores. It wouldn't be long before he'd collapse over. His leg was aching and probably rotten with infestation. It would only be a matter of time. Chapter 7, The Father of Death. The year was 1889. It was a cold, harsh, bitter winter, and the town of Darbsey had become a white memory of isolation and overgrown woodland. The trees were draped in heavy snowfall and the ground was covered in inches of sheeted ice. The air was brisk, and the wind carried through to the west and blew through the land as if January would be forever lasting. Darbsey was a town of few. The population had been the same since its founding. A mere population of less than 100 families resided. Most of them were farmers who were passing through at one point in time and had accidentally found glory in settling there. For the land was properly placed for growing wheat and corn as well, which gave them more reason than none to stay placed there. Oil was also being talked of at the time. A large man named Brock Henry had drilled first there, and then others had followed after, which gave the town a reputation for livelihood and permanent placement. Brock Henry was the town's local savior at that time. He brought the town an easiness that they had not seen before his arrival. Striking oil along the outskirts of Darbsey was a local treasure for the majority living deep in the mountains covering 3 angles of Darbsey. Before the oil strike, most of the town lived under the silent night of wax candles. Many of the residents there had bad eyesight and had cataracts along with whatever else plagued them at the time. On the east side of Darbsey, a shallow, ignorant, religious man named Hall Gene Edmonton had caused an uprising. 2 days had passed since he had, but the church had already decided his departure and replaced him with another man named Kip Westbrook. Kip was now the newest member at the church, and without as much as a word he was now filling Hall Edmonton's massive shoes. Some of the townspeople had begun gossiping behind locked windows that Pastor Edmonton had finally lost it. They felt he was overly fanatical, somewhat malevolent and dangerous within his preachings. But, after his last tenure, they had witnessed enough of his preposterous spittings on what he believed correct. The higher priests there had anointed him when he first came to the church in belief he was the one who could bring the town together, but after 15 years of his twisting, churning of biblical scripture, they had decided to shake things up, and nobody appeared eager to stop them from doing it. It was at his own mercy that they had given up on him. Justice was at the helm of a new beginning. Hall Gene Edmonton began to spiral and fall into a Great Depression, and had found a way to keep his following from falling to nothing. It was February and the ground was still ice and powdered white under the moonlight as he chipped away at the forest behind the Colonial. He cut down the trees in the field acres behind the home he shared with his wife May. The sound of birchwood fell onto the snowy land, cracking in the night, sending a sharp snapping sound into the wind. The sound was angry and deliberate, and could be heard all the way into the second-story bedroom where Luella Edmonton spent a great deal of her time. She wrote private letters to her secret fiancé Travis. He was away and hadn't come home yet. She awaited the moment in great anticipation but hadn't received a letter in return, and it had been months since she had. She dropped the inkwell onto the wooden seal along the windows of her room. Taking a break from her writing, she peered out into the field, towering over the cold frozen land. Her face was inches from the glass, as she imagined another life. She pictured a life, where things were much different. Without her father or the intolerable abuse or his constant drinking, and shattered thoughts of his old crow. Her hands met her belly as she stood silently at the windows beside one another. The sound of Hall's axe continued in the distance, and the echoing sound of heavy limbs slamming into the flattening snowfall swept in from outside. Her hands were wrapped around her stomach as she felt the strange sensation growing inside her. Kicking, and tumbling, a secret lied inside of her, one that Hall Jean could be no part of. Her mind was weakened by these thoughts, the desperation had set apart them both. Jean was a danger, his beliefs had warped him into a religious maniac. Luella Edmonton sat in her room quietly at times and could overhear him in the night, freakishly mumbling, secretly down below in his office. The sound of his voice changed from high to low as if his personality was lost, or as if he had many, but whatever had happened to him, it was not of good, but the doings of evil. Midway through the stare-filled night, the snow had fallen without as much as a moment of his axe being laid to rest. Hall was in the pitch dark, alone in the cold without a shimmer of light guiding him. His axe continued to chop down the tallest trunks in the far-off distance, as Luella lay at her bed watching the windows. Her belly was up as she lay wondering about Travis and what reason he had not to write back. She pulled up her gown, noticing her belly button was beginning to rise and had become hard as she pressed her fingers against it. "Jacob," she spoke quietly as she played with her stomach, hoping he could hear her already. The night had come and went, and the candle beside Luella's bedside had burnt halfway to the glass dish placed underneath. It was daylight as she unleashed her tired eyes at the window. The heat from outside radiated into the glass, she could feel it on her arms as she lay. Listening for her father, she twisted her hair and placed it up tightly in a bun. Her gown lay along the wooden floor as she left the room heading for the stairs. She met his studying office, but he was nowhere to be found. She wondered if he had come in during the night. As she crept towards the kitchen, she noticed something strange lying on top of the handcrafted table her father had built of the same trees in the forest. She neared it, as she stared in horror and wonder. A page from her diary had been placed outright, torn in half and burned along the edges. A struck match lay in a small symbol just a foot from it. Her stomach began to fill with pain and anxiousness. Hall had stolen her diary, or had read it. The thought horrified her at the greatest extent. Trembling, she was now beginning to feel vulnerable as she approached the basement in curiosity. The door was cracked and had never been left open prior to it. Her father believed in closing doors and leaving nothing undone. He was an obsessive man, who became enraged over things such as it. She held her stomach with both hands as she came to the framework where the door hung open just slightly. Her face had become numb. The page from her diary lay still burnt at the tabletop behind her. Clutching her fingers tight almost as protection from Jacob, she gripped the door with one hand as it creaked open. It sent an eerie noise into the colonial, a noise that reminded her of her father's entrapment and torment. A sudden light hit her as it opened before her, and the sound of footprints shuffling in the dim light began down below in the musky cellar. "Father," she whispered, panicking at what punishment he might provide her with over her writings. He didn't reply, as she crept onto the first step in front of her, leading down where loose dust filled the steps. Suddenly, she could see something below to her right, but the wall along the stairwell blocked her from seeing clearly. The tiny candlelight shined from there as it flickered in the darkness surrounding her. Luella quietly tiptoed until she reached the fourth step down into the dark room, stopping a moment in terror. Her chest tightened. Suddenly, she could see a pair of human legs lying flat along a wooden workbench, but out from her full view. The legs were hairy and that of a man, she could see partially as she neared them. The dim light shining from behind the wall was glinting in the shadows ahead of her. Luella carefully made it to the final step as her bare toes contacted the ground beneath her. Again, she could hear a strange, unusual sound of shuffling from behind the wall blocking her from the table. She inched her way closer, keeping her head hidden as she reached the wall's end. Her body was trembling in the nightmarish dark. Her arms were shivering and cold, and the hair on her body had stood up. A frozen chill blew in behind her as she stood at the wall hesitating to peer further in. An odd odor came from ahead. She could smell it growing as she hid behind the only fixture blocking her from the man lying on the workbench. She peered around, scanning the other side of the room from the wall, but seeing nothing out of the ordinary. Her mind was spinning in a world of diabolical thoughts. Luella Edmonton thought of the man, then thought of her sick father, and the sinister feeling aching in her sternum. In her belly she could sense the tiny kicks of an unborn child, almost warning her to leave, but she couldn't. A pain shot from her lower stomach into her chest as she forced herself to stare past the aging wall. Suddenly, she leaned against the wall covered in dry mud and old horsehair plaster materials her father had once mixed. She fought herself to lean over it as she lowered close to the ground, in hopes nobody would see her. Her hands held the wall as she crossed the wall and momentarily fought to see through the glimmering darkness. Suddenly, she lost her strength. Her eyes were suddenly black holes, overwrought in terror. The sight before her was paralyzing and vile, causing her to vomit amongst the floor in front of her. She crawled towards the workbench in inconceivable pain. A light paleness covered her once bright face as she urged herself closer along the floor. The smell of flesh and rotten skin covered her hands as she crawled to the bench in front of her. Vomit continued to drip from her mouth as she began to rise onto her weakening legs under her. As she stared, her chest felt a flames burning within her. She stared into the blackness where Travis had been tortured to his dying breath. His heart was severed from his upper body as his chest lay open and hollow before her. The chambers that once attached his heart were gruesomely sliced from the atria and ventricles and lying along the same bench. A pointed metal file was jabbed deep into it and stuck forcefully into the wood underneath. As if a descriptive message was being told that very moment. A message written in her lover's blood that read, "Darling, you are mine and nobody else's, no matter what you think," and signed off below, "Love your murdering father." "Travis, my beloved," she began sobbing uncontrollably. Tears streamed from her face as they hit the filthy ground where his blood had dried. Luella Edmonton stood at her lover's side, gawking painfully at him. His intestinal organs hung from his openly gouged chest as if somebody had immense hatred towards him. His ribcage was pried from him and hanging from a butcher's hook not far from the bench. Droplets of his mutilated remains dripped slowly onto the surface below as she squeezed her eyes tighter in a hell-felt agony. Overcome by the gruesome scene, she shut her eyes awaiting it to stop around her, but it wouldn't. It was reality. The first thing that came to her mind as she opened her flushed eyes was her sick father. Hall Gene Edmonton. She thought about him standing over Travis. Suddenly, she became maddening and enthralled at the thought of him and what he had done. "Sick son of a bitch, why Travis? It should have been me," she cried. The shuffling had stopped. At first she wondered if it were her dreadful father. After peering through the lacking light flickering over the walls, she realized her father had left the door partially open for her to find, as well as her diary entree on the table upstairs. It was a last-ditch attempt at controlling her with his tasteless acts of callousness. A religious coward he was, sickly and disturbed. Hall was at a finish, all and forgive none, only at the cost of death. Luella peered into Travis's eyes as if he were still alive. His eyes were staring back as if he wanted to comfort her in some unimaginable way. His mouth was agape as she examined him for the final time. Running her fingers along his face, she leaned for a subtle kiss. As soon as her lips touched him, a bitter coldness ran through her body, almost awakening her. Suddenly a door slammed heavily above her. Chapter 8, Skeletal Preachings. A year earlier, on the date of December 11th, of 1888, Jane Marbella Edmonton had been missing for over a week and nobody had seen her since. Hall was distraught. A wrecked state had pursued over him, one that left the church at a standstill. Although, he continued to provide Sunday masses that had gathered there, to listen to him advocate messages of hope and faith. His face blurred of jealousy and hidden torment that ran through him and out from his control. The flock that grew to know him could see he was bothered, much more than bothered, grievously suffering and sickening before the church. Some of them had skipped that very Sunday, but others were blindly led by his considerable knowledge of powerful wisdom and religion. His energy was unmatched and the way he spoke before the crowds in such capacity influenced them without them realizing his troubled life. Hall was a coward, one that knew it himself, but left the world crossed in his deceitful ways, thinking he was a godly man. Jane Marbella Edmonton and Hall Jean Edmonton had married 15 years earlier before the court 10 miles south of Darbsey. Jane was due to have Luella the same month, and was turning 19 at the time. Hall Jean Edmonton was already older, at the age of 23. Both had themselves, and had lost their mothers and fathers young from a variety of diseases that swept through the old town. Although, they were just beginning a new chapter in their lives, it would never become the fairy tale lovers dreamed of under starry nights. The wedding came and was filled with laughter, and although their parents were unable to come due to their demise, they did have extended family there. A ceremony was being held along the hills where they planned the reception. It was an August afternoon and everything at the time seemed as planned, until that evening when Jane realized something she hadn't noticed beforehand. Hall was someone else, and not the man she married, but it was too late to turn back. She wore the engagement ring he had given her, but knew he hadn't bought it honestly. After he had fallen asleep that night, she draped her body with a hand-weaved blanket given to her as a gift. Plodding upstairs, she made her way along the hallway and ended up in the spare room. A room they had both prepared for the baby in her stomach, Luella. Unborn, but very alive, Luella could feel her mother's heart beating against her as her mother discovered something she had wished she hadn't. Her hands began to tremble as she unwrapped a knitted towel she found stuffed deep inside of the armoire. The cabinet was where he collected his hunting rifles, but she felt a sudden curiosity grow over her to check inside. Earlier that afternoon during their reception, Hall had left the celebration to run home quick but hadn't given her much of an excuse. Even the others noticed his odd behavior. Hall continuously had his hands in his pockets that afternoon as if he were nervous about something, and that's when she realized he was bleeding underneath his dress pants. He was cutting himself with the tip of a moose antler his father given him as a boy. She seen him puncturing it deep inside himself deliberately, and he appeared to be pleasured by the pain. Hall's father had hunted his entire life and had taken Hall only a handful of times before he fell ill from severe pneumonia. Hall never regained his childhood afterwards, and had spent a great deal of his time alone in the woods. His mother had passed away not long before his father from a rare blood disorder that left her unable to walk. A few years afterwards, the farmhouse where he spent his childhood became unlivable due to the lack of maintenance and was taken by the state in return for back taxes owed on the massive property. The farm still remained until the livestock was bidden away to local farmers. Jane stood frozen in regret as her hand held the towel apart in front of her. Her face became white and her entire body became cold as her eyes fixed upon it. Her belly wobbled a moment as if unborn Luella also had sensed her mother's silent plead for help. Holding it up, the light shining in from outside lit the towel as she fought to keep from screaming. Two bent fingers lay inside, cut from the bone and hardened. One was wearing a golden band and the other was missing one, where the skin had been indented. She held it for another moment before hurrying it back into the armoire. Her stomach twisted at the thought of Hall, and why he possibly had kept such a thing. She wondered if it were his trophy? The reasons bolted through the newlywed like a sizzling fireball shooting through the night sky. Jane lay beside Hall that night. It was late but she couldn't get back to sleep. The thoughts of her husband and the fingers made resting incapable. She fought to relax herself on the goose-feathered pillow underneath her as she stared motionless at the wedding band on her hand. Holding her fingers high above her, she knew it was that of a dead woman's. Whose ring was it? She wondered as unspeakable terror blanketed the room. She began crying silently beside the killer she knew as Pastor Hall Gene Edmonton until her eyes closed. They squeezed shut midway through the night, the same as the death that had been forged, taken away from another, and given as a new to her. A wedding ring that held no value but the value of another woman's life was now caroling her finger, Adeline. Written by Jared Neely. Chapter 9, The Spot. Luella remained beside Travis as she ducked low, listening for her father. The door had shut aggressively above her as she trembled in fear of her father. The cellar door was open still on the first floor but he hadn't yet come down to find her. Her fingers gripped the pointed file bludgeoned into her lover's entrails. Pulling on the handle until it flung out and onto the floor, causing a clattering noise that shook her nerves even more at the thought of Hall coming in. Travis laid on the workbench motionless, battered and tortured in reward for his love of the pastor's daughter. Luella fought her tears, as she wiped her face of his blood. Her face became cold and was covered in human waste that had come from the floor under her. The light continued to flicker around her as she crept back towards the stairway leading to the kitchen area. She peered upwards and could see the door still cracked. Her hands held the wall almost balancing her to stand, her weakened legs were as thin as wires and her stomach was jiggling with Jacob fighting along her side. A pattering sound above her stopped her in her tracks, as she put her hands against the wooden railing leading up. Her feet were dirty and bare as she stood against the wood listening. "Jacob, Mommy's going to get you out of here, I promise baby," she cried to her unborn child. A moment later, the noise seemed to die off, she was unable to hear anyone upstairs. Quickly and quietly she took one step at a time until she came a foot from the doorway in front of her. Her eyes peered from the tiny crack revealing the kitchen and table where her diary was burnt purposely at the hands of her sick overbearing father. Only able to see ahead, she clutched the door handle and gave it a soft push forward, as it opened and swung against the kitchen wall. It unnerved her as she spun her eyes from side to side in hopes Hall wasn't there waiting. Suddenly, she found herself alone in the kitchen. Standing up from the door, she hastily strolled for the front entrance leading to the outside, to her left on the far side of the room. As her hands met the knob, she frantically pulled for it to open. She was fighting for it to come undone but something held it closed from the outside. In curiosity, Luella spun around to check behind her, but before she could react she was bluntly hit in the back with something sharp and blunt with massive force. A sudden pain surged across the back of her skull. Blood trickled onto the floor from her body as she slumped over face down. Hall had struck her in the head with a railroad tie. And stood over her dying body grinning. The veins in his eyes were broken and red and his face was frost-bitten from the cold. He held the railroad tie in his left hand at his side, peering at Luella who lay unconsciously along the floor shaking. Her nerves were jittering about, causing her legs to tremble and convulse, and her mouth was moving but words hadn't come out. Her head was gashed deep and bleeding onto the ground surrounding her until her eyes became dark circles and soon after became lifeless. Hall dropped the tie at her side and left her. An hour had gone by as Hall came back and lowered his face to hers. "Jacob, oh Jacob, I know you're in there," he said. Disturbed and unhinged, he spoke to her unborn child who was moving in her belly, unaware of his mother's failing life. Hall stood over her as he touched her wounded head where the rail tie had struck her. "Yoo-hoo, Daddy's gonna cut you free. Mama took a fall, but God has his hands around her now." He then reached down into his blood-covered jeans and retrieved the moose antler his father had given him. "Goodbye, Jacob," he cried aloud, as he jabbed it into his precious daughter. Evening came to a close and the night sky turned dark and black. Hall chopped the trees in the far woods until the sun rose above the colonial. He murmured in the night air, lunacy as wild as the animals crawling through the land. He screamed and howled at the moon above, speaking in gospels to himself. His axe was covered in his daughter's skin, and her remains were scattered about the field as he stood peering at her, preaching unspeakable horrors. He preached to her and Jacob as if they were still living and breathing and standing with him. In the far distance behind the colonial, way out in the field, he had built a chapel. He had used barn planks and wood he had taken from the trees in the woods to build his very own private worshipping place. Shunned from the town's church, he now had another place to conjure inner demons and preach his twisted beliefs. "Luella, oh Luella, let's take a walk and visit God. The chapel is near, my dear, and the work I've done will cure the fog." He sang a demented tune as he gripped her severed arms from the grassy ground. After placing pieces of her into a burlap sack, he reached for Jacob. Standing over top of his mutilated corpse, he spoke again. "Oh my! What have I done? Oh Luella, what have I done? Where did you go, my dear? I have your son." He continued, tossing pieces of him into the bag, dragging it along in the night. Chapter 10, Miss Me Much, Miss Me More. Dick fell to the ground along the poppies and wild daisies sprouting in the field. His leg was aching tremendously as he held it lying in the soil. He had made it only a few yards from the strange clearing where the ground was oddly pushed away. "You bastard, Dick, get a fucking grip on yourself!" he cried. His teeth were bleeding and his mouth was cactus dry. His clothing ripped and torn from the chapel. Wounded and mentally broken of all spirit, he cried dry tears until he could no longer cry any longer. In the distance the phone hung from the kitchen wall. The colonial hushed the sound of it ringing, in an attempt to keep the agony circulating around the fellers. The phone rang 3 times until it abruptly ended and went cold, hanging there. The colonial held its wicked cruddy hands over it to keep Dick from knowing hope was on its way, and it was but how long? He lay along the dirt as weeds blew over him. He closed his mouth from it getting in. The air was picking up stronger as he managed himself to fight and get back onto his tired feet. His boots were drenched in rainwater and his hands were frail and weak. Attempting to clutch his fist, he walked towards the colonial, but he lacked the strength to pull his fingers completely shut. He had never been drained to this extent. It was mind-bending. Arriving at the stone stairs leading up to the colonial, his body limped forward as he fought himself to the door. He grabbed the door handle and could barely grip it with his frail fingers. After 2 attempts at getting it open, he fell to the deck below. Son.of a. He couldn't even finish the sentence. He had enough. His hair was filthy and his back was covered in crumbled stone underneath him. Suddenly, as he lay on the surface before the door clattered and then slowly opened in front of him, lying there. It stuck that way, as he watched, but he was alone. The smell of lilacs hit him again as he twinged his nose, getting back onto his feet. The heaviness of the aroma circled the outside as he entered into the doorway. Dick sat again at the kitchen table, where the Edmontons had once occupied the location over 100 years earlier. He sat with both hands along his cheeks, thinking quietly to himself. The same mug stood in front of him, as well as the odd strangers from a day earlier. His eyes were locked on it, as if he were listening to a secret conversation being told around him. The hair on his neck rose as he sat silently listening in a room filled with past torment and horror. The colonial was imprinted of a family who once bared their hearts and souls there. Nothing could endure the wrath that remained inside and out along the land. They would forever be haunted by the memories of the dead. Never would those memories die, not in a million years, at least with the presence of Hall being forever held there. Immoral, cold, calculated killer of all shades and colors, Hall, the town's lone preacher. Hall Gene Edmonton, a pastor who led his flocks into the demented world of sacrificial religion. Dick Feller sat for another moment before getting up. Plodding upstairs, he retrieved a straight blade from the bathroom dividing both bedrooms across from the other. Some mornings he would use a straight razor to straight shave before heading to Fulla's Brothers, but this was not one of them. Taking his time, he crept back to the stairwell and slowly went back down until he reached the bottom step leading to the kitchen, where he took a deep breath trying to calm down. Leaning over before reaching the wooden chair, he took his boots off and tossed them along the wall. Dick peered out into the field from the window on the far wall of the kitchen. The sunlight was still beaming down and burning as bright as he could ever remember it. His hands were in his jeans as he sat again, lowering down into the seat. The straight razor resting in his fingers, he twisted it in the light as it reflected across the room. Quietly, he raised his hand at the other end of the table, holding the razor towards the unseen. "I can't, I have to be here." He began to cry to himself sitting at the other side. "Can't you see, I'm just renting here?" He cried into the openness of the room, his hand shaking, still pointing the glistening edge of the razor at something or someone, as if he could hear them forcing his hand. Urging him, heckling him, whatever evil it was, wanted nothing but his pain to last. It wanted his neck, it wanted him. Unsuspectingly, a trail of dust and debris flung from behind a woody wagon heading up the driveway towards the Colonial. The vehicle speedily made it to the driveway as it slid to an abrupt stop at the end of the stairs. The driver's door swung open, and Julia was home. A patient at the hospital had given her their keys to hurry back, after a shortened phone call she received from the Montana Police Department an hour before arriving. For a moment she stood behind the door, peering up at the Colonial. The sun hit her face as she shielded her eyes and left the car as it were. Julia Feller scurried to the rock stairs until she reached the front door. It was shut and locked as she knocked hard against it with her jittering fists. She appeared excited and nervous, and was crying. Her eyes were moist and her hair was a mess, as she pounded her fists into the door, but Dick hadn't come to open it. "Open up, Richard, Dick, hurry, I have something to tell you." She shouted into the door, hoping he would soon come, but he didn't. Her fists were begging to hurt from knocking as she left the door, scrambling for the nearest window outside to look in at the kitchen. She crawled through a patch of wild bushes until she reached the bricks. The ledge was higher than she could reach, as she fought her hands to grip it and pull herself to eye view of the inside. "Damn it, Rich, get up and let me in," she cried from the ledge as she peered in at him. All she could see was the back of him. His hair was matted in dried soil and his shirt was wrinkled badly. He wasn't moving or turning towards her, which rattled her as she lowered back down onto the plants blocking her from the Colonial. Suddenly, another car gassed its way up the long driveway towards the one she got out from. A freshly painted, red 1963 Ford Falcon. Julia hadn't met the tall stranger from a day ago, nor did she notice the Ford as it screeched in beside hers. Julia was still hammering her hands into the door in an attempt at breaking it open, but it wasn't one of those weakly built doors they put on mobile homes. This one was hard oak. Julia would need more force at doing it. She would need someone to help her pry it open, if it could even be done. The Colonial had shut it this time. It wasn't Dick Feller who had done it, and it wasn't earthbound powers that held it. It was sinister and dark. It was Hall Gene Edmonton. His hat was on, and getting it off would be almost inhuman. Hall was a deadly apparition. The evil he carried over to the other side was a growling, ghastly, tormenting cycle of bad versus good. The devil himself stared through his eyes, and religion was his cover-up, his make-up, his blush, the foundation that hid him. Hall Gene Edmonton was masked and riddled as a false prophet, a murdering father, a serial killer turned husband, a manipulator and a sinner who had been forgotten, but now, he was back. And after waiting ages he was much stronger. The wind began to pick up behind Julia as she stood at the front entrance of the Colonial. The sky was as bright as a ripe orange on a summer day, and the clouds were moving slowly over top her as she kicked at the solid door. She fought with the door another moment, before a voice came from behind her. "Mum, I knew it'd come again, I knew he'd be back, Mum," he said, as she spun around meeting him face to face. His face was old and deeply marked with age. He wore a top hat and had funny pants on, appearing too short for his scrawny legs. "I spoke to your husband, Mum. I told him of the dangers here," he said, putting his hand out towards her. She backed away. "No, Mum, this place," he said, uncurling his fingernails towards the colonial. "It's evil, dear, best escape it before it escapes you," he cried. "The name's Easter Duplin," he said, but Julia wasn't concerned for who he was. Dick was inside and hadn't moved since she'd peered in. "Dick's in there, please, please, I beg you for your help, Mr. Easter," she cried, as she left him standing under the tiny roofed porchway leading down the rock stairwell. "I'll do my best, Mum," he shouted towards her, as she ran across the field in search of a stick to wedge in the door jamb. Suddenly, the elderly man began treading back to his Ford Falcon, and retrieved something in his hand that was small and out of Juliana's view as she eyeballed him from the field. Closing the driver's door, he cautiously made his way back up the stone stairs and put his one wrinkly hand on the door. The skin on his hand was loose and hung down, and the deep veins were visibly bad as well. Julia came to his side empty-handed. "What are you doing, mister?" she asked him, but he was already in the middle of something. She took a good stare at his arms as he unscrewed the clasp on a tiny purple bottle made of blown glass. "Stand back, dear," he said, low but strong. His voice became different as he whispered protection for the fellers. "Roots of evil, the hallowed ground here, I pray in God's name for the strength of your armies in heaven. Jesus, come down to earth, unleash your angels, I beg of you to help this family. They are you in your need and I can only do what is humanly possible to help them, my Lord." Suddenly, he upturned the bottle and sprinkled something water-like a substance onto his hand and rubbed it against the door. Forming a crucifix, he wrote the name Fellers across the broad door, using the blessed liquid. The bottle was only filled halfway, as he continued to speak again. "In heaven's name, in the domain of God, I pray to you for this family, my Lord." He spoke louder and direct and began to clench his face tighter. Julia watched in horror at him, as the sky behind them in the field became dim and the heat that once radiated seemed to lose its velocity. She turned and peered out, taking notice of it. "Is this normal, Mr. Easter?" she questioned him, knowing the answer already. Mr. Easter left the doorway with the bottle in his hand, leaving Julia alone by herself. The sky began to darken suddenly, and the once whitened clouds appeared to have left. Lightning struck as she stared out into the openness. The trees in the far off were swaying and leaning and rocking from side to side as if something truly sinister had come. Mr. Easter had made his way to the other end of the colonial, as he faced the home lacking the confidence he seemed to have when he first arrived. "Lord, I need you for this family," he shouted as the wind circled the colonial, blowing wild weeds and plantation into him. He waved it away as he spoke again. "Help battle this sin, and protect the family here with your holy power," he shouted as Julia listened from the porchway. She could only see his dress shirt blowing behind him. Demonic winds were now raging against him every time he spoke. "Don't take this family the way Hall took Jane from me, my Lord," he screamed, as a fearsome bolt of lightning struck above, sending a tree in the distance to the ground. "Jane, if you can hear me, thy Lord Jesus, if you are with her, I beg of your presence here at any cost to me, my life for theirs if it need be," he cried in the heaviness of the raging winds pounding into his scrawny frame. Julia left the porch and scrambled towards the other end of the colonial as well, leaving Mr. Easter on the right side alone and vulnerable with his aging body. She quickly found a heavy stick uprooted in a small flower garden beside the brick wall. A window was above her as she backed away, throwing it with all of her muscle, but it ricochets off and landed at her feet. "You bastard!" she shouted, leaving the stick lying in its place. She then remembered a small section of lettuce along the front of the Colonial that had warped over time and was hanging off. She had intentions of asking Dick to fix it but somehow overlooked it with being pregnant and all. It was a tight fit, and maybe not enough room for her to wiggle in, but it was the only option. Plodding her way to the front of the Colonial, a deck wrapped around the front where a porch swing hung alone from two swivels the previous owner had installed during their tenure there. The wood along the deck was rotted and appeared badly destroyed over time. The Fellers used the back of the home because the driveway was essential and the highway was there also, along with the field for Adeline to have a full range of playing space. Julia recalled seeing the wrecked section of lattice when she unloaded her paintings in the cellar the day of moving in. She knelt at the foot of the steps leading up and clutched the lattice where she believed it to be worked off. As she tugged it towards her, a pin popped and it fell into her hands. Great work, she thought quietly as she lowered down onto her stomach and began wriggling into the darkness. The darkness was uncanny as she felt using her hands to find the stairs leading up to the first floor. No light shined in from outside, the cellar was damp and dark and smelled musty. "Dick," she whispered, hoping maybe he could hear her, but terror soon hit her as she touched something wet against the bricks. She was unable to see it. Slapping it against her blue jeans, she cleaned it off and began waving her hands in front of her, not to fall on anything. A minute had gone by as she met the foot of the stairs. In pure adrenaline, she quickly hurried upwards to the door, which was shut in front of her. It locked with a sliding lock on the outside, but to her astonishment it was unlocked as she clutched the knob, turning it open. The light from outside hit her face. Although it was dim, it blinded her for a short moment. Julia peered in, noticing the windows being hit with surging rain. It had begun pouring heavily outside and she no longer heard Mr. Easter pleading with the Colonial from outside. Staring towards the kitchen, her eyes met Dick sitting motionless and disoriented. His face was pale and his breathing had become faint. "Honey, can you hear me?" she asked him, before approaching him any further. His arms were out along the tabletop and clenched tight. Julia peered from the far side of the room, unable to see if his eyes were shut or open. Dick Feller appeared unconscious from where he sat, arms stretched out and clenched, his legs hung down heavily against the floor. Julia crept cautiously towards him with a fretful expression across her face. She was sore from the nights she had spent in the hospital. Julia was in the same pair of hospital scrubs given to her at the General Hospital as she neared her husband. Her legs were weak and her stomach lingered in pain from losing her baby nights before from complications. Approaching Dick, her husband, an alcoholic, the hard-nosed father of her only child, she crept towards him face on. She stared at him as she reached him, putting her hands on his shoulders to shake him awake. "Wake up, Richard!" she cried, peering into his eyes, partially open, but asleep somehow. "Dick, it's me, Julia, baby, damn it, Dick!" she cried, sobbing as she grabbed him harder by the shoulders, shaking him until his head flung backwards. Suddenly, her eyes became wells of black ink, and her mouth dropped as she stared. Trembling in horror, the skin upon his trachea was pierced from side to side. Suddenly, she watched in panic as her hands loosened upon him. She backed away that moment in horror. The thin skin along his windpipe split, unfurling, spraying dark blood onto the table in front of them. She screamed in terror. "Dick, oh my God, what have you done to yourself?" But he didn't reply, as it began to run out from his mouth and teeth. His eyes were still open, but he had lost full consciousness. Hastily, she ran to the kitchen counter and clutched a hand towel from the sink top, wrapping it around his throat in desperation of saving her husband. The blood was gushing now and his legs were beginning to kick underneath the table. "Baby? I'm going for help," she whispered into his senseless ear. Before she left him, she gripped the receiver on the wall, frantically dialing for help. "Please, pick up," her hands were quivering as she held the receiver to her hair. "Damn it, hurry up please," she cried, holding it closely, listening for it to ring, but there was a sudden sound of nothing. She then realized the cord along the wall had been deliberately cut. A kitchen knife used to cut it was lying nearby along the counter. "No, no, no," she cried aloud, heading back to Dick's side. "Honey, I'll be right back with help." As she stood at his side, she noticed his arms stretched on top of the wooden table. His fingers were tight against one another as she reached for them. "Dick," she whispered, attempting to pry them from the table in hopes to carry him out instead. "Baby!" she cried at him, but he was unable to hear or react to her. His arms were sturdy against the table as she fought to get him up. Suddenly, his left hand opened up, revealing his palm against the grain. Juliana's face went cold, as her eyes traced his hand, examining the tiny tool. A blood-covered razor lay against it. His fingers were lifeless but hadn't gone blue, and she knew time was running out for him. She gave up on carrying him, as she peered to the other end of the kitchen to see where Mr. Easter had gone. Unable to hear him, his Ford Falcon was gone as well, which gave her the instant sense of abandonment. "Fucker, fuck," she said, crying to herself, not far from Dick, bleeding out. Tears covered her face as she stared about the room, wondering what could be done for him. Shockingly, the cabinets above the sink slammed open, heavy pans and dishes began crashing to the floor, battering her feet in broken glass. Juliana's eyes opened wide, screaming in horror, trembling as she backed away towards the stairwell. She could sense the evil, the dead, watching her as she sobbed uncontrollably and shaken at the sight of the possession going on in front of her. Suddenly, the sink knobs cracked on, sending gushing water onto the floor about the room. Startled, she screamed for Dick to wake, but it was only an eager attempt at escaping without him. "Dick, you need to regain yourself, get up, baby," she cried, as the wild cabinets swung, smacking the wall, until the hinges loosened, falling to the floor as well. Julia suddenly turned towards the stairs, leaving Dick in the demonic presence of something she had only seen on frightening horror movies as a child. Her arms were gripping each other as she peered towards the stairs. Without warning, the noise in the kitchen came to a sudden stop. The cabinets had broken from the wall, and the pots and pans were now a useless mess along the floor not far from Dick's feet. Just before reaching for the door, her eyes crossed the top of the stairs leading to Adeline's room. Terrorized over the activity, her body suddenly became numb and paralyzed at the sight of something standing atop the stairwell. Incapable of moving, she stood staring into the mass-like figure. The dark figure appeared as smoke, moving lifelike as it held the banister, peering at Julia almost as if it could see into her. There wasn't a face to place on it, no expression, just the organic vapors moving along, summoned by Satan himself. In a flash, the presence of it vanished into thin air, leaving Julia no longer captive. She turned towards the front entrance, gripping the door, but it was sealed as her hand slipped from it. "Why?" she shouted in anger towards the Colonial, although it was more than the house, or the property, or the dead that remained. In haste, she treaded into the kitchen and clutched the cellar door, but it was also secured by something there, something ungodly and wicked. Frantically, she left the kitchen and Dick sitting there with his head hanging. She hadn't stopped to check over him, almost forgetting him in a fit of rage. Chapter 11, Burial. Suddenly, Julia could smell gas filling into the room from the registers along the floor. The substance was freely surrounding her and Dick sitting unconscious and near death. The furnace hadn't been on. Dick Feller hadn't serviced it since they moved in. "Dick, something's here, is it? We're not alone," she cried towards him, holding her face from the poisonous gas flowing through the ductwork and out the vents. "Who is it, Richard? Did they get you to hurt yourself, baby?" "I knew it wasn't you," she sobbed, as tears came down her blush cheeks. Julia then hurried to the sink and grabbed another towel hanging underneath on a metal rack. She placed it around his face and clipped it on tight, with a clip she took from the fridge door. The poisonous vapors were now filling the Colonial in an attempt to end the Fellers, who had reunited after losing their baby days earlier. "Pillows!" she cried, peering down at Dick sitting motionless at the table. "We need pillows and blankets, baby. I'll be back." Julia rushed to the stairs, remembering the dark entity she came in contact with moments before, but ignored the unnerving feeling in her body. Creeping up the stairwell, she held her hand over her mouth, breathing as shallow as she could manage. It was quiet as she neared the tip of the stairs, lifting her foot for the final stair. She immediately heard an unusual noise that startled her. It had come from Adeline's bedroom. Peering in at the emptied room, only occupied of her bed, dresser and her favorite pair of dolls, Ruthie and Dasha. She could feel someone's eyes watching her every movement. Covering her face, she crept in through the doorway and began snatching the pillows from Adeline's bed top. Carrying the two, her face and nose exposed to the poisonous gas, she quickly hurried back downstairs to the kitchen where Dick's dying body rested among the chair. She stuffed the two pillows in the lone register along the floor beside Dick at the left center wall. Gas was still blowing forcefully into the kitchen through the pillows, causing her to panic even worse. "Oh!" she cried, as she left him again, scurrying back upstairs for anything she could find to barricade the poisonous fumes. She stared into Ade's room again, off-took by something she hadn't taken notice when they moved in days before. The vintage wallpaper above her bedliner was now flipped on one corner and hung down almost touching the bed. Julia grew curious, as the fumes continued to fill the colonial in every room. Entering her room yet again, she pinched the paper on the wall and pulled it the rest of the way with her fingers. Adeline. Written by Jared Neely. Remarkably, her eyes wandered in curiosity at the sight of a diary page stuck to the inner wall. The original wood underneath was badly scratched and carved in two. The diary page was torn short, and only a short reference remained written over decades of sitting behind the wallpaper. It was rough and faded, although it was readable. "God saves" was neatly handwritten on it. Julia reached for it with her free hand, the other one on her face. Plucking the page from the wall, a sticky sound radiated into the room, like duct tape coming off of leather. "Holy shit," she whispered quietly through her fingers. Astonishing, a peephole remained underneath the note. It was the size of a small apricot and appeared to be hand-drilled a long time back. She attempted to stare through it, but the darkness behind the wall enabled her to see. The wood in front of her seemed to be a replacement, possibly something one of its owners had used to cover a spare room or secret closet in with. Julia eyeballed the wall, understanding the poisonous gas flowing and couldn't be stopped. Not just by her, if there were even enough blankets, she wondered quickly as she kicked the board blocking the wall. "Come on, damn it!" she shouted through her hand. She backed away and charged towards it again, hastily dropping her foot into the thin wall covering. A sudden creaking noise sprung from the wall, as she pulled her foot away. She had split the wood, but it still held up against the studs behind it. Again, she backed away for another blast into the homemade wall, and as she did, she put all her power into it. Straight away the wall come flying out on both sides at her, landing against the bedside. Dust and debris covered the room, as it hit her. Unable to see anything, she lifted her hand from her mouth and for a second lost her breath. Coughing and choking from the deadly fumes and the thick dust ball that freed itself as the wall came tumbling down, she peered in through the pitch dark. A hidden hiding place lay inside, and the unimaginable sight she barred herself for. Juliana's face stared straight in disbelief. The skeletal remains of Hall's wife, Jane, was tied from head to foot along an old rocker. Appearing to be tortured, her fingernails clutched a tiny trinket that remained upon her lap. Her nails were shattered and yellow and had grown since then. The skin along her hands had shrunk back, causing them to appear long and hollow. Julia examined her from the outside, where the light from outside gave her a vivid sight of Jane Marbella, the wife of Hall Jean Edmonton, who had been missing for well over 100 years, believed to have run off with another man. She watched in horror, remembering Adeline crying to both her and Dick nights before after the scratching noises awoke her in her bedroom. "It was you, weren't it?" she asked, holding her face still. "I'm sorry, Ade, I'm truly sorry we put you through this," she cried, tearing up thinking of her daughter. Rationalizing about her and how both she and her husband ignored the signs occurring in front of them, that something about the colonial was not right. Julia stared at the face frozen inches from her in the dark. The image of a woman, once beautiful and elegant, turned into a brittle sculpture of decaying bone and flesh. Jane Marbella's hair was white and knotted in dead mayflies, dust and spider eggs hanging down upon her from the ceiling inside. Her mouth was open and covered in the same mess. Her teeth were broken and sharp and stood out from her mouth like shattered tombstones. Julia watched in disgust, at her eyes, and how they slanted to the side, still open as if she endured a horrible death. It was a death that taken its good old time on her, a torturous death of being trapped alive in the dark. She could smell the gas lingering upstairs. It permeated into the room as Julia gripped the trinket out from Jane Marbella's dead fingers. As she pulled the box, her fingers broke from her wrinkled arms and crumbled onto the floor, leaving a pile of rotten ash. She held the box in her hands, leaving her exposed to the deadly fumes. Opening it, she hurriedly began twisting the circular lid as powdered dust and moldy dirt sailed from it into her face, causing her to gasp. The air cleared around her face as she held her mouth and nose once again, peering down at the trinket that once rested in the skeletal hands of Hall's late wife Jane Marbella Edmonton. The darkness of the hidden room was uncanny and sightless. Behind Jane were various ropes and chains hanging from a rail bolted above her. A patch of dead flies had made their home inside her right eye and had packed the hollow socket with dried babies. Julia lifted her face as she retrieved an item from the box, holding it in her hand as dust poured from it onto her jeans. She knelt down and examined the portrait of a small boy. It was hand-sketched in charcoal and had faded around the bottom of its border. Above him on the portrait it had the number 5 and the writing, "If you live to see the age of 5, this will be you, Jacob." Julia stared at it a moment before placing it inside the trinket box. Another vintage item lay along the bottom, as she picked it up and gawked curiously at it. It was a hand-chiseled cross made of wood that read "God Saves" written in Old English. As she turned it over on the flip side, the initials JM were carved into it. It appeared to have been Jane Marbella's, possibly one of her prized possessions, she wondered quietly, holding her face from the gas. Suddenly, her back became frigidly cold and she could feel a sensation standing over top of her neck. The hair stood up along her neck as she slowly turned to face the doorway. Peering at the doorway, she was alone, but felt an uneasiness growing around her. Breathing in the room was beginning to grow forceful as she gripped her face in desperation to leave the dead woman. The air had filled and had intensified around her into a thick ball of poisonous fumes spreading throughout the colonial. She caught her foot against the wood on the floor and almost toppled over. Getting up from the floor, she stared at Jane again in the dreadful darkness. In the hole behind her she noticed something strange standing out from the sawdust, webs and rubble. It stood only a foot or two from the filthy ground where Jane Marbella sat in her final resting place. It was square at the top and box-like and barely peeked out from the darkness at her. As she approached it, it was decrepit and had spent its life there since around the time the colonial was first built. The unit was sealed in wax as she neared it. It appeared to be an ancient wine cabinet or something of that nature. Around the doors a thick yellow-colored wax covered it, and on the front where the doors met, a snake laid across the doors holding them together as a lock. It resembled a cabinet she had once seen in the old country as a child, when her mother had taken her to see her dying aunt. But, as a child she was told never to touch it, and that it was for bad little boys and girls who didn't do as they were asked. Those children were the ones to find out about the Dybbuk box when they disregarded their parents' wishes. A malevolent demon would wait for them to open the seal, and as they did, the demon inside would possess the body of a living person until exorcised. Julia examined it, but hadn't opened it, remembering the story her aunt had once told her before failing from brain cancer. Her eyes were on the ancient cabinet lying inside the darkness as she came closer. The air inside the dark felt easier than out in the room. Somehow the gas hadn't made its way in. Covering her face in the pitch black, she crept around Jane Marbella's body on the rocking chair and knelt beside the aged cabinet covered in debris. Her eyes fixed on it, when suddenly she felt a forbidden hand brush openly across the top of her back. Startled, she turned her head in total loss, unable to see anyone in the room except for the shadows in the room. Her eyes watched from in the dark, but could only see her daughter's bed and dresser in the background. In front of her the decrepit cabinet leaned over in the stale air. Gawking at it, she accidentally bit down on her lip, from under her hand cupping her from the fumes outside. She could taste blood as her eyes swelled at the sight of the evil box. Suddenly she realized it was worse than it appeared. A large crack had formed over time along the grains of the maple wood. It ran down the far side of the cabinet as it glimmered in the darkness. The wax had peeled from it, and had left a sizable hole. Julia suddenly felt a strange emotion sweep over her standing by it. A dreadful sorrow filled her and the space around the rocking chair and Jane's skeleton. It almost left her impaired and unable to escape from the dark space. The demonic energy still surrounded the aged cabinet as she stood in silence fighting to breathe. Her arms were tingling now as she leaned towards it and broke the seal even further to see inside. Her fingers were shaking as she reached inside to poke around in the dark. As she yanked her hand quickly back out from the cabinet, she opened her fingers, surprisingly holding a glass butter dish. The dish was elaborately designed and made of pure crystal. Staring at it a moment, she held it in her palm, pulling the lid from it to see its importance of being there. She covered her mouth again, lowering the dish onto the ground below her. She felt overpowered by the same emotion that hit her a moment earlier. Dread. A horrible dread carried into the stale air around her and Jane. Clenching the lid to the butter dish, her eyes burned against it in terror. A lock of wavy hair lay inside the dish and smelled of deteriorating lilacs. The odor was horrendously strong as she covered her face even more snug than before. Beside the strands of dried hair lay a rancid wedding ring. 2 oval diamonds braced the top of it and a dulled yellowish gold wrapped around it. As she stared standing, she lowered down and took both from the dish, leaving the darkness and Jane Marbella sitting quietly forgotten. At the stairwell she barely stumbled to the bottom step as she reached the front entrance. Hesitating to open it, she ran for Dick sitting alone beside the broken mess of glass and wood. The same as he was. His face was back and the towel swirled around his trachea was saturated in fresh blood. His legs underneath the table were still and no longer kicking. "Rich, come on honey, let's get out of here," she shouted at him, pulling him by the waist, but he was too heavy for her. She had forgotten the door, locked and concealed under the Colonial's orders. She held the dish in her jeans as she gripped him once again, but it was no use. It was useless, and she suddenly felt it. Outside of the Colonial the rain hammered the windows almost as if it were fighting for her. The Colonial was standing against God, but to it, it didn't matter. Its only reason for existence was to ruin what was wholesome and lively, and turn it into something inferior. It poured against the windows in buckets of heavy rainwater. The glass was strong and held up no matter what it threw against it. Julia pounded her fists against the tabletop, causing the razor to fall from Dick's lifeless hand. "Damn it!" she cried as she sobbed standing beside him. "Is this what you fucking want?" she shouted into the poisonous air. No longer was she holding her mouth or nose, she was now breathing it in, killing herself to be with him. "I guess this is it for me, you blood-sucking roaches, whoever you fucking are, with us, in this fucking sorry excuse of a home." She stomped about, cursing at the Colonial. Dick Feller was lying back, she was unsure if he were dead or hanging on a hinge. His face was ghost-like and splattered in his own blood. A sudden growling voice, a snarling horrid voice, touched the top of her ear. As she stood at the bloody table, "Give me your blood, bitch." A glacial coldness radiated through her as it went silent beside her. The thunder began banging from outside the Colonial. The old historic windows in the far side of the kitchen shook as if they were ready to burst into flames. Julia stared in horror, finally gripping her pocket, retrieving the elaborate butter dish. It trembled in her hands as she placed it against the tabletop in front of Dick. She breathed once again, before holding her lungs closed, opening the dish and placing the lock of hair against his pale, lifeless face. Julia brushed it over his throat and rubbed the blood onto hers, finally taking in a breath oxygen. Staring at Dick and then peering at the dish and the wedding band inside, she began to speak softly and calmly to the colonial. The darkness from outside began tossing shadows about the room where she stood with Dick Feller. The shadows appeared alive, shuddering across the walls and both of their faces. Julia continued to spread the hair as if it were a painting tool. An ancient bloodletting ritual had begun, but she hadn't realized what she had started. She dipped the wavy hair again into Dick's severed trachea and summoned the words that came to her as she lifted the wedding ring from the dish. Julia began to hammer the ring into the table using great force, striking it 3 times as she cried over Dick bleeding beside her. Clavis Feralis, Malleus Feralis, Ferrum Ruflum, Ferrum Nobilis. She then scored the wedding ring 3 times against the table, creating 3 deep engravings in the wood. Afterwards, she left Dick sitting in the chair unmoved and hastily made her way to the cellar door on the other side of the dark kitchen. Julia had her fist clenched around the golden band as she reached the doorway. The rain continued to surge outside as she felt for the knob, turning it as she closed her eyes in hopes of it opening. Suddenly, she smiled, the first in a long while, growing ecstatic that it had somehow unlocked. She opened the door leading down her ring for the ground below. Her hand was tight against the band Jane Edmonton had once worn in dread. The ring of a murdered girl against the palm of her hand, she carried it to the bottom as she peered in total darkness. Strangely, an unusual light came from outside, although the sky had turned black as the storm gushed of heavy rain. The light came in steady and shining, allowing her to see. Oddly, where the lattice was left open, a spot remained along the filthy basement floor where the concrete had broken away. Hardened soil peeked out from the missing concrete as she crept closer. Her fingers were nervously shaking as she crouched at the broken concrete in the floor. Julia took another breath, hoping for relief, as she poked her fingers into the mud. Digging desperately, she used her hands, scooping the dirt from the ground until a tiny hole was left. Please give me this, God," she pleaded, as she dropped the rancid ring into the dirt. A blank darkness covered it as it fell in. Julia peered at it as she kicked the soil over onto the hole where she had buried the ring and the spell she spoke along with it. A spell that she felt summoned to know. Words that could rid her family of evil. The words of an ancient world and civilization she couldn't recall learning but somehow understood in her subconsciousness. Julia could smell the gas pouring in still, her stomach was nauseous and she felt greatly ill. Standing in the cellar, she too was near death, breathing it in had done something to her organs. She covered her face again, peering at the stairs leading upwards into the kitchen where Dick remained stationary. Her eyes were watery and her face was caked in grit. Her hands were pasted in her husband's blood, quietly praying for herself before God. Her eyes turned towards the darkness where the light had died off a moment before, as she fought through the darkness reaching for the opening. Leaving Dick with the colonial, a price she'd have to live with. Just then, she broke through the absence of light as she crawled out through the tiny space. She gripped the wild grass growing beyond the colonial until her feet could go no further. Lying there on the edge of field, she stared into the night sky. The rain had finally come to an end above her as she listened to the wind barrel around her and the scenic property. The sound of trees ruffled in the field beyond, far off in the forest. The highway along the colonial had turned dead, quiet and still. Momentarily unscathed by the horrendous evil, she wept selfishly along the dirt. She overheard the sound of a cluttering vehicle, as her eyes opened, lying motionless against the ground. Bloodied in filth, tangled in sweat and hair, she listened to it come closer as the engine shot. Her legs were straight in front of her and her hands were lying across her chest. The sound grew until it reached the edge of the colonial's massive property. Pulling into the driveway, she ignored it. Barely able to turn, she turned her painful body over on her side. It was a pickup truck. Whose was it though? She wondered as she lay out of breath, still smelling the poisonous gas spraying out from the Colonial. Suddenly, the red pickup truck pulled into the driveway, with an unknown man at the steering wheel. A silhouette of another person rode shotgun with him, but she was unable to see much more. The night had darkened above her and the clouds had returned since the rainstorm. "Julia!" called a man from the dented red pickup truck. His window had rolled down. "Julia? I'm searching for a Julia, or a Richard?" he shouted from the driver's window. She listened but was unable to speak. Her chest was overwhelmed in poisonous gas. "Do you know where I could find her?" he asked, with a loud country accent, staring at her from the driveway. Julia lay along the grass, fighting to speak, but she was incapable of summoning a word this time. Her body had been through the loss of a child and somehow escaped the Colonial, and then there was Hall Jean Edmonton. "I guess I'll have to keep searching, Mum. I'll just leave you be now," he shouted, finally closing his driver's door. Julia raised her hand into the night sky, in an attempt for his help, but he had already started the noisy engine. She lay listening to the pickup as it backed out from the Colonial's property. She dropped her weakened arm back onto the ground beside her. "Screw it," she murmured sluggishly, barely opening her mouth to speak. The pickup had left as she listened to its clattering motor disappeared into the far-off distance. A powerful wind occurred that moment above her lying there. The Colonial stood over her, growling in hatred of her. Attentively listening to its displeasure of her being alive, it wailed and roared just a few short yards from her. She paid it no mind lying there in the grass, feeling secure. A moment passed over her listening to the Colonial. She laid open-eyed, longfully stressed, as she began to snicker to herself peering up at the moon. Her eyes became heavy as she fell into a restful sleep along the lawn. The full moon gleaming above her went down as she slept easily in the wet grass. She felt better. It was warmer now, as she slept. Something was different, but she hadn't opened her eyes to see what it was. Outside was still, and calm, even the trees appeared to be still. The smell of wild poppies and fresh grass had went away, far away, as she cracked her eyelids open. It was still black out, somehow, or was it? "Wait!" she cried, "what the fuck? No. This isn't right!" She screamed, petrified, sitting in the pitch black. Fighting the darkness, her hands were tethered against the arm of a chair. She was unable to get away. Her legs were also bound against the foot of it, as she fought to escape. She rocked uncontrollably in the rocking chair, hidden in darkness and behind the very walls of the Colonial. Ear-piercingly squealing from behind the odious walls, Julia would soon suffer exhaustion and die the death of Jane Marbella Edmonton. "Hey honey, I see you're finally awake, darling. Are you hungry yet?" the voice of a man from behind the wheel asked. He held the steering wheel as they drove along the old highway. He wore a cowboy hat that had a police patch that read Transportation Authority Police across the front. He also had long black sideburns and a funny goatee, one she had never seen before on an officer of the law. "I like your goatee, mister," she said, her young voice crackled as she spoke. "Am I going to see my mom and dad now, mister?" she then asked him, watching him steer the red pickup along the winded road. They were about 20 miles off the beaten trail of the Colonial. "Well, young lady, I did see a woman about 20 miles back," but he then paused, and peered into her eyes. "Well?" she asked him, her tiny face, young and innocent, stared back at him that very moment. "Well? She wasn't your mom, Julie, it is right?" he asked her, making sure he had it correct. "Yup, that's her, mister," she added, turning her head back towards the open road. The officer driving the pickup peered over once again at her. "I still don't understand how you gotten so far from home," he said, driving in the opposite direction of the Colonial. They were lost and had driven all the way from Montana to get her back. "I called your mama," he said, keeping his eyes glued to the road ahead. "What'd she say?" she asked him back, Her knees were propped up on the dashboard of the old dented truck. She said she misses you, Aid. The end.